Hi, my name is Felix Matos Rodríguez, and I am the Chancellor of the City University of New York. People who know me call me Felo, and this is my new conversation space on CUNY TV, Café con Felo. Bienvenidos a Café con Felo. Today I welcome a true civic leader and a dear friend whose work has impacted generations of New Yorkers. Lorraine Cortés-Vázquez is the Commissioner for the Department for the Aging and has been serving in this role under two mayoral administrations. She has led efforts to make our city more inclusive for older adults and launched the first ever aging cabinet to bring agencies together in support of equity and dignity for older New Yorkers. Lorraine has made history as the first Hispanic Secretary of State in New York, and throughout her decades of service, she has championed equity, civic engagement, and access for communities that have long been underrepresented. A proud Latina and Boricua trailblazer and a Hunter College alum, Lorraine is also a valued CUNY Trustee, advocating for leadership and opportunity across our diverse student body and academia. Lorraine, it is a pleasure to have you here at Café con Felo, and we always ask a coffee question. So are you a coffee drinker? And if so, how do you take your coffee?
I'm not a coffee drinker.
We're going to have to change that intro.
I know, no. You know, it's something that my mother and grandmother have apologized to everybody whose house I visited.
As they should.
You know, because and they would say, ella toma té, ella está enfermita. ¿Qué le pasa? But no, I was a coffee drinker like every Puerto Rican child from 5 to about 8. You know, before we went to school, I used to love a big coffee mug like this, con un poquito de pan with a little bit of butter, and you dip it in there, and that was our breakfast before we went to school, until the school found out and said we needed to change that. And for some reason, I never really enjoyed coffee after that.
Thank you for that anecdote about sort of growing up and having the coffee. You know, one of the things that is very unique about your career is that in this career of service, you have focused and servicing, you know, young people, adolescents, you know, older individuals, and people tend to have niches. You've had an accordion of service. What do you think in either your preparation, your life before, sort of got you ready for that kind of very, very inclusive approach of serving all kinds of people?
You know, thank you for that. I started in early childhood. I started in Head Start. I don't know. I just think that my grandmother and my mother and my great-grandmother were really, really dynamic women. And for them, it was all about service, right? And so when I was first started, I was at early childhood. Then I was at aging. When I was at aging, I made a commitment then that we were never going to ask for money at the expense of young people. And that was a real commitment. So I think that was what balanced that. Because from aging, I went to Aspira.
No. So it's been, and then you've been
back
and forth, and that, which is a theme in your career, sort of coming.
Well, my mother has another theme about that.
It's okay. We won't, you know, I'm sure she'll be watching, but, you know, and God bless her. So I know you're very, very proud of your Hunter roots. You're in the Hunter Hall of Fame. Are there things that you can reflect back on those years of your, you know, your Hunter undergrad years that you think have marked you as you've gone in this journey into public service?
I think so. I think two things about Hunter. You know, Hunter is one of the few CUNY campuses that doesn't have a campus. So our campus is Fifth Avenue, in Old Hunter. Our campuses were Fifth Avenue, Madison, because we had classes in very distinct places. And I think that exposure to that part of the city was very enriching. It was the first time I went to theater, and not theater, the first time I went to an opera and classical music was because of Hunter. So I think it enriched me in, this is possible because of this. I would have never had that. There was nothing in my background that would have given me that exposure. So Hunter gave me the interest in the city, and then the interest from the family part of service. I think the combination of those two was what helped build who I am today.
And And my memory is that you were raised in East Harlem, right?
Born and
barrio,
raised
right?
in East Harlem. I'm a barrio girl.
So it's interesting that you've had Hunter. I mean, now there's a part of Hunter School of Social Work is in East Harlem, right? But back then, I mean, fairly close in terms of you think about, right, Manhattan. But from your description, universes away in terms of the exposure.
Absolutely. When I think of El Barrio, I think of El Barrio is like uniquely and fabulously positioned. To the less than 2 miles was, Silk Stocking District,
Yeah.
Hunter, and all of that grandness. So we were able to see what that was a possibility, which meant that if that exists, then it's possible for us, right? And then to the east of us in those times, it was an Italian conclave. And there were a little bit of tensions between the two communities, right? And then to the northwest of us was Harlem. And that was also an interesting dynamics. So when you think about people in East Harlem, which is why I think they're so creative and resilient, is because they had to navigate all of that stuff, and it wasn't easy. No. And so it made you think about how not to be part of those kind of struggles, but how to mend those kind of struggles if you really wanted to make it.
Yep, and to build bridges,
and
which is
build
something
bridges,
you've been doing.
right.
My dad also grew up in East Harlem, and he has stories about which streets you wouldn't go into, which blocks you wouldn't go into,
and what time,
or how fast you would move if you were in those.
And how many people you needed to travel with if you were going to be on a certain avenue.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I forgot that about your dad.
This is very, very. I mean, those stories were really great. And so then, Hunter, you did additional public policy work at Wagner with your master's in that. Was that very, very intentional because you knew then that this whole thing in public service was going to be the constant thing in your life? Or was it in part because you were moving, with people in those political circles, and why public policy as opposed to having gone for an MBA or a lot of women, for example, did work in social work and or education, right?
When I went to school, the MBA for women was not as easy as an MBA is for women now. So, you had to kind of like take a leap that you could do it. Mm-hmm. We didn't have our graduate center. We didn't have Baruch in the same way,
Absolutely.
And even Baruch wasn't that, But I think I was in public service when I went for my degree, and I knew that I was missing something. I'm a good manager. Yeah. I'm a good technician, but there was something I didn't have. And so that I knew I needed more information, so that's why I went for the MPA. And when I went, and they also made it easy because they had a program that made it easy for people in government. So that was also an important factor. But what's fascinating about that was when I was in my MBA classes, I realized what I was doing instinctively was good and solid and sound. What it gave me was a framework and foundation. And I tell that to people all the time. You got to go get those fundamentals so that you know exactly what you're doing, and now you can predict more about what the outcome is going to be rather than before you would do it. Por Dios que salga bien.
I hope it works out. So one of the things, and we were chatting about this before the show began, about the exposure you've had, not just to different sites of government, right? You've been at the state level of the Department of State, you've been in the city in aging, and for example, you've been in the nonprofit space in the Hispanic Federation, at the national level with AARP, you've also been in the corporate sector. So there's a common thread there, which is service, right? So you can say that she's been in the service space, if you want to put it that way. But there's also something, modern in the sense of more typical to younger generations in which you've done shorter stints, right? And then continue a trajectory, right? So I think in that way, people in your generation, many people stayed in one sector, in one place, and they made a career. You've been in and out. What advice can you give to students, who are thinking about their career, sort of reflecting on yours?
Thank you. That's a great question. My advice to young people, my coaching to young people would be, don't stay any place more than 7 to 10 years. Any place you stay 7 to 10 years, you start really believing what you're saying. You don't kind of get new ideas, and I don't want to say you get stale, but you get comfortable. And comfort is the worst thing for achievement, right? And so move. But move to something that will challenge you. You know, like don't move to the same. And the other thing I tell folks is like, even in government, this is particularly true. Sometimes you have to leave at a lower level so that you can come in at a higher level. Because it's very hard in government to go all the way up, particularly in some of those appointed positions. Yep. So I recommend to young people, I would also say don't do what some of you do right now, which is like every 3 years, you know, give yourself some time to know the business and to fail at it and also to regroup at it. So give yourself some time.
Well, or to really contribute in a way
yes.
that you can use that to make a case for whatever is next
right.
and have a sense
and for
of
whatever you want to
accomplishment.
see.
Yep. Sense of accomplishment. Yeah. And no, I mean, clearly, I didn't mean that you're changing very quickly, but
oh, my mother thinks so. But anyway,
different generation. Let me also ask you about something which I know because I've had the pleasure of knowing you for many, many, many years, and I think I've benefited from that. So, you know, either people look at your resume or people get to engage with you and they see somebody who's multitasking. Always involved in, you know, different projects, jumping from Puerto Rico to New York to the Dominican Republic to whatever is needed at the national level. But I also know that you take special pride and joy at being a mentor and supporting the next generation. You're particularly focused on women, right? Yeah. And but I also know that you're an equal opportunity person because you have benefited people like myself, right?
Oh,
I mean, obviously now you're in the board as a board member, different relationship, but through the years, right? When I came to Central, can you tell me a little bit about that side of Lorraine in the mentoring and what is there a story? Is there an individual or people that you like to sort of highlight? Because I know that you enjoy that and you do that a lot.
You know, I've been so fortunate that lots of people did it for me, not even deliberately, but just did. And I go back, I know I sound like a broken record, but my grandmother and my mom and my great-grandmother, I mean, they were women way ahead of their times. And you know, my grandmother was a union organizer, right? And so she was no nonsense. And she was a union organizer because she had a bad boss. And so, you know, and so it's that kind of...
At a time, too, where, you know, women were not always as welcome in the labor movement and a Latina woman, to make it even more complicated.
Absolutely not. And she was also 4 feet 11. No one dared mess with her. But there was, you know, they always taught you to lift while climbing, you know? But it was the same way, you know, if somebody came to your house, you add a little more water, you put a little more rice, you always had to be there to help somebody else. And you got to lift while climbing. And if you don't, it's pretty lonely at the top. And you don't have a crew. Everyone, young people, all the time, create your board of directors, create your crew. And you do that by helping others all the time because somebody did it for you. You have the responsibility to do it for somebody else.
Excellent. So let me ask you, and we were chatting about this also before in the context of something else, but I think viewers believe they know what the New York State Secretary of State does, right? Because I think people hear that and they think that that you are somehow traveling all over the world, right? In terms of the New York State diplomatic relationship, if that exists, and or that the Secretary of State is like a lieutenant governor type figure, and it's like, no, New York has a lieutenant governor, right? So for the viewers who might not be as familiar with that role, can you give them a little bit of a sense of what the position entails, and then what were some of the things from, I mean, you made history by being the first Hispanic that did that, but some of the things you did there that you have taken into your bag of great satisfaction?
Oh my God. First of all, I won't even be funny about the Secretary of State role because it is multifaceted. And sometimes I think about it, it was the one agency in government where they kept thinking, we have to do this, where do we put it? Seriously, where it wasn't mission driven. Housing is housing, public works is public works, but this was one that was sort of, and education was education. So this was one of those agencies that sort of like evolved over time. The thing that I loved most was, that I enjoyed the most was the licensing piece.
Interesting.
We did a lot of fun stuff there. I was sued by NYU law school students because of some of the representation we had. And what did I do? I told them, oh, you're going to sue me? Guess what? Now you're going to serve as the attorneys for the people licensing, because they were saying that the licensing, which it was uneven. So all of the licensings for all of the trades in New York, all right? So that major, especially for people of color, because that's where they kind of come up. And so how do we make it work for them? Coastal resource management. The one thing that I love is that Broadwater did not come into New York. Broadwater was a mining company that wanted to do some oil digging in the New York Sound. We stopped it. We made a national precedent, and then in California, they had an oil spill right after we passed. We defeated them. And so lots of stuff, all of the coastal management of New York, the licensing, all of the civil litigations, the little minor civil litigations. Consumer affairs, I believe, is in some way there now. And now it even has immigration issues. Yep. So it is one of those agencies that has many facets. It's a great agency. And it's a real job, You do not do any international relations, but you do a lot of relations with all those counties across the state. Firemen was another thing that was under Secretary of State.
That is.
So, mira.
Well, but in a way, I mean, an agency that, as you said, right, because it could be so broad in the mission, many things fit it, probably a perfect fit for somebody like you that, back then and even today, had experiences in many aspects of government and could sort of have that versatility to do that, right? Because you have, worked with Aspira, you have done your early childhood work before, the Hispanic Federation, which was a great window into the needs of the Latino community statewide, but some of those are similar to what other groups face too, right? And let me ask you about the Hispanic Federation, because I know this is a special sense of pride in you, and when you think about legacy, right? Can you talk about first your experience there, and why it has always been such a special place for you?
I think just the Hispanic Federation is a special place. We had this fearless, relentless leader called Luis Miranda. And the Hispanic Federation has served as a model for Latino organizations in its fabulous succession planning, I must say humbly. And then I was the successor to Luis Miranda, which I knew very early on. It'd be a fool's dream to try to fill those shoes. So I needed to carve a path, building and making sure that I did not fail what he achieved so much. And so that was my tension there. It's like, make sure you build it and build on what he created. And each leader has done that. It is an amazing thing. I remember it was created to be like a Jewish Community Council, right? UJA, United Jewish Appeal. And it was like, okay, that's a big, but it was a good rabbit. Yeah. That was what we were going for, right? Building a network of agencies, funding a group of agencies, and we succeeded. Yep. We don't, in comparison to their endowment and ours, it's a little different, but we always had a good relationship with them. And I remember in my tenure, I said, I want to be you when I grow up, right? And they said, and we want to make sure that we have your numbers when we grow up. So that was a natural alliance that we had, and it worked, and it still does. And the Federation is committed to the Latino community and to growth and leadership in the Latino community. How could not that be perfect in the world?
Yep. And also the growth of beginning focused in New York and then sort of going, national, right? Which I think was, as you say, a model for so many others. But this is a perfect segue. The first part of the show has run rather quickly. So we need to take a quick break. And when we return, we're going to have some great questions lined up from students that are very close to your heart because they're students from Hunter College. So we're going to be taking their questions when we come back. So please stay tuned. Welcome back to Café con Felo. We're here with Lorraine Cortés-Vázquez, Commissioner for the New York City Department for the Aging, CUNY Trustee, and proud Hunter College alumni. And fittingly, today's student questions come from Hunter College. So let's see what some of the students have to ask her. I think our first student is Valerie.
Across the United States, it is not uncommon for older adults to have a difficult time accepting their age, considering negative stereotypes surrounding aging. As we know, this issue can contribute to not reaching out to resources and even delaying addressing health concerns. So my question for you, Commissioner Cortés-Vázquez, is what approach is the city taking to challenge the stigma, and how would you encourage elderly to reach out for the care that they deserve without fear of mistreatment or judgment?
Great. Thank you, Valerie. Great to see you. I would say, Valerie, you used the right word, stigma. When you think about older adults, there usually is a stigma attached to age. And it goes both ways, young and old. But in old, just like with women, we internalize a lot of those stigmas and almost start believing them, and we act accordingly. So we are marginalized, and then we act marginalized. Sometimes we don't even know that we need help, because we're in denial, because if I need help, that means I can't do it on my own. And everybody's telling me that I'm marginalized. And so you're always combating that. But the way we do that is to take on ageism head on, and also to really do a lot of positive reinforcement on what the benefits are, how you are not needy if you use these benefits, that you worked your entire life contributing through taxes so that these benefits were there for you and these opportunities. And also, one of the things that we're trying to really encourage is about work, staying in the workplace. If you're going to live in New York City, you're going to be economically challenged if you're living on a fixed income, and so you need to support your income. And in that area, we try to educate employers, and we also educate the older person that you can do this, you know how to do this, and we talk about the benefits of their participation in the workforce. So it's a lot, but it's focusing on the positive and trying to reinforce and undo the marginalization and the internalized oppression. And you as a young woman know that, because sometimes people say things about what young women can do and cannot do, and we've got to step, and you have to constantly step outside that and combat that. And so we combat ageism.
But I mean, I love what you said too, because part of the idea here too is that the help that you might need as you get older, it's not that in other parts of our life, government or the other entities are not helping you. Right? We tend to accentuate that as a sense of need, but I mean, as a student, we cry at CUNY for how many services we have for students that they don't take advantage of, right? So it is that at all stages, there is support and assistance. It's a different kind one, right? When you go into the aging space, but it doesn't mean that people before were not taking advantage of help and support.
Absolutely.
Right?
But for some reason, if you're very poor or you're old, all of a sudden it becomes as if you're not able to do it on your own.
Yes, yep.
Right? So that's the stigma. So she used a perfect word.
Absolutely. So we have a second question from Isaac.
Isaac.
What experiences or individuals from your childhood in East Harlem inspired your path into public service?
Isaac. You know, everything. I think when you live in East Harlem, you know that first of all, you know that's a perfect life, because everything is right there. You got the museums, you got the park, you got everything in East Harlem, and you got great food. What you realize is that what you don't have is a sense of people and government reaching out and supporting you. And so to combat that, you know that you have to create that. And that's one of the things that we did was, how do I make this government work for this community? I see it working in other parts of this city. How do I make this work for this part of this world that I adore, called El Barrio? And that's I think drove me to public service and being useful to a community that's so rich in talent and assets, and the only thing that they need was money and support.
Good. Yeah, and I think one of the things that is interesting is, and you think about El Barrio, you know, sort of like the La Cuna, the cradle, one of the anchors of the Puerto Rican community here, right? So you can do that, but it's also a neighborhood that, as you say, is in contact with many ongoing either migrant groups or others, right? And so it's also a space to learn to negotiate what the very best of New York, I mean, complicated at times too, but the very best about different people coming together and different successions of new immigrants coming in, right? Mm-hmm. And being able to navigate those things too. So, I mean, you think about how El Barrio keeps that identity.
It was like the Lower East Side, El Barrio was a melting pot of many, many groups coming in and calling it home. Like today, it's mostly Mexicanos and South Americans.
I knew that the conversation with you was going to be rich and multi-layered. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your great public service to CUNY, to the city of New York, and maybe we can have another Café con Felo. There might be some new chapters, right? Always in your life and in your book. So thank you, and we're so proud also that you wear the CUNY and the Hunter Alumni Badge with great distinction and joy, and so thank you for that. And
I thank you, Felo, for what you do every day on behalf of these hundreds of thousands of students that we have. Porque tú te fajas.
It's a joy, but thank you. So, and to your viewers, thank you for joining us. Catch Café con Felo every weekend on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays at 8 p.m. only on CUNY TV. Saludos.